The Voron High Council had 17 languages. 17, each one more sophisticated than the last. Each one capable of expressing 1,400 distinct emotional states, 600 mathematical theorems, and approximately 4,000 ways to say, "You are embarrassingly wrong." And yet, on the third cycle of the Andromeda survey mission, all 17 of those languages failed to produce a single word for what the crew of the vessel Cathedora was currently witnessing on the pale blue they had cataloged as Survey Body 7 Omega, a human, alive, in space, not in a ship, not in a suit, not floating in a pressurized environment of any kind. Just standing on the outer hull of the Cathedora, arms crossed, looking directly at the observation window with an expression that could only be described, even across 17 languages, as, "Yeah, I see you too." Commander Vril of the Voron pressed 4 of her 6 hands flat against the glass and stared. Behind her, her science officer, Thaka, made the sound that roughly translated to a Category 3 stunned silence, which was a kind of stunned silence reserved for events that technically should not exist. "Is it waving?" Vril asked. Thaka checked the sensor panel, then checked it again, then turned it off and turned it back on because clearly something was broken. The bioskin says it is a carbon-based life form, oxygen-dependent, with a core body temperature of approximately 310 Kelvin. Thaka paused. "It should be dead." "Noted," said Vril. "Is it waving?" "Yes," said Thaka. "It is waving." The human, for its part, did not seem concerned about the vacuum of space pressing against every cell of its body. It tilted its head, tapped what appeared to be a communication device on its wrist, and spoke. The words, translated by the ship's language core after a 3-second scramble across 17 databases, came through as, "Hey, you guys planning to let me in, or are we doing this whole first contact thing through a window?" Vril turned to look at Thaka. Thaka turned to look at Vril. "Open the airlock," Vril said quietly. "Commander," with respect, "the creature is standing in hard vacuum without any life support apparatus and is surviving, and your suggestion is to let it inside our ship." "Yes, into our ship." "That is what I said, Thaka." There was a long pause. Opening the airlock, Thaka said. The human's name was Orin Sable. Male, 29 years old, native of a northern region on Survey Body 7 Omega, which the humans called Earth, which they also sometimes called the Third Rock, which the Voron translated literally, and then sat quietly with for a moment. He walked through the airlock like he had done it 100 times. He took a seat in the decontamination chamber. He looked around at the walls of the Cathedora, tapped his chin and said, "Nice ship. Very geometric. I like it." Vril, watching through the safety barrier, folded 2 of her hands behind her back in the Voron gesture that meant, "I am keeping myself calm through sheer professional discipline." "How?" she said very carefully. "Are you alive?" Orin pulled something small and metallic from his jacket pocket, held it up, and clicked it twice. "Piva suit. Photon-embedded vascular armor. Nanomesh membrane. Regulates pressure. Recycles oxygen. Shields from radiation. Custom built." He pocketed it again. "The helmet's built into the collar. Invisible when inactive. Activates automatically when atmospheric pressure drops below 0.3 atmospheres." The translation finished. The Voron science team stared. "You built that yourself?" Thaka asked. "Me and 3 colleagues," Orin said. "Well, 2 colleagues and 1 argument. Long story. Here is the thing about humanity that the Voron had not expected. And truly, the fault was partly theirs for not looking more carefully at the pre-contact data. Humans were not supposed to be a spacefaring species yet. Their civilization, by all Voron projections and timeline models, was approximately 400 years behind the technological threshold required for independent space travel. They were supposed to be busy having disagreements over land and resources, possibly launching small metal tubes at one another, and generally being the kind of species that needed at least 3 more centuries of development before they could think about leaving their own atmosphere without blowing something up. And yet, here was Orin Sable, sitting in the decontamination chamber of a Voron survey vessel that was parked 200 million kilometers from Earth, completely unbothered, eating what he had produced from a second jacket pocket and described simply as a granola bar. "How did you find us?" Vril asked. Orin chewed thoughtfully. You've been broadcasting on a narrowband frequency at 17.4 gigahertz for the last 6 months. He swallowed. We noticed. Vril turned slowly to face the communications officer, Doss, who was suddenly very interested in examining the navigation console. Doss, Vril said very quietly. The signal was suppressed below theoretical human detection range. Doss said quickly. Theoretical? Orin said helpfully, still eating. Great word. We like that word too. Vril pressed one hand to the ridge above her primary eye and breathed. This was either the beginning of a very productive interspecies relationship or a catastrophic intelligence failure on the part of the Vorin Survey Division. Possibly both. Knowing humans, almost certainly both. You are going to be very inconvenient, she said. Orin Sable smiled, crumpled a granola bar wrapper, and placed it neatly in his jacket pocket. We get that a lot, he said. The Vorin High Council met in emergency session approximately 6 hours after Orin Sable finished his granola bar. 14 senior members, 3 interpreters, and 1 very tired communications officer named Doss, who had been summoned to explain himself, sat in a circular chamber aboard the flagship vessel Vencora and stared at the footage from the Ketdora's observation deck. The footage showed a human, standing in open space, waving. Council Elder Peth watched it 4 times. Then she asked a question that every single person in that chamber was already thinking, but was too dignified to say first. Did he bring snacks onto our ship? Doss cleared his throat. A granola bar, Elder Peth. He placed a wrapper neatly in his pocket afterward. There was a silence. He littered on our observation deck, said Councilmember Rual flatly. No, Elder. He kept the wrapper. Another silence. A different kind. He kept the wrapper, Rual repeated slowly, as if testing whether the words made more sense the second time. They did not. Back aboard the Kethdora, Orin Sable was sitting in the crew's common area, drinking something he had produced from a third jacket pocket, which Thaka had cataloged as hot liquid, plant-based, mildly stimulating. Orin called it coffee. He said it was essential. Thaka was beginning to believe him, not because of the drink itself, but because the alternative was allowing the human to remain uncaffeinated, and something in his expression suggested that was a worse situation for everyone. Commander Vril sat across from him, 5 of her 6 hands folded on the table. She had been trained for first contact. 14 years of diplomatic protocol, interspecies behavioral studies, and communication theory. None of it had prepared her for a human who sighed at the coffee like it was an old friend he had nearly lost. You said your team detected our signal 6 months ago. Vril began. Correct, said Orin. And your government sent you. Orin paused. He looked at the ceiling. He looked at his coffee. He looked back at Vril. My government, he said carefully, is aware that I am here. That is not the same as being sent. No, Orin agreed pleasantly. It is not. Vril unfolded one hand and pointed at him. You came here without authorization. I came here with extensive personal authorization, Orin said. I authorized myself very thoroughly. Filled out all my own paperwork. I was very professional about it. Thaka, standing near the doorway, made a soft sound that, in Vorin, meant something between this is fascinating and I need to sit down. Here is the second thing about humanity that the Vorin had not accounted for. And again, the data had been there. They had simply not weighted it correctly. Humans were not a unified species. They were, in fact, approximately 195 separate political entities, each with its own rules, all of which were apparently optional to at least a statistically significant portion of the population. Orin Sable was not a representative of Earth. He was a representative of Orin Sable, who happened to live on Earth, and who had spent 4 years building a prototype suit and a one-person entry vessel in what he described as a garage situation. A garage, Vril said. A large garage, Orin clarified generously. The Council's emergency session reached its conclusion 3 hours later. The decision, passed by a margin of 11-3, was as follows. The human was to be treated as an unofficial first contact individual, pending formal diplomatic channels with the Earth governments, who had since been notified and were, according to intercepted communications, reacting approximately the way you would expect from 195 separate political entities learning that one of their private citizens had beaten them to alien contact by 4 years and a garage. The intercepted communications included 17 formal protests for congratulatory messages, one government issuing a retroactive permit, and one very long document that appeared to be a legal bill for unauthorized use of atmospheric exit corridor. Humans, it turned out, were the only species in the known galaxy who responded to alien contact with paperwork. Vril handed Orin the translated summary of the council's decision. He read it. He nodded slowly. He took a long sip of coffee. So, he said, you want to open formal relations with Earth. We want to open formal relations with Earth's governments. Vril said precisely. You are technically a private citizen. Sure, said Orin. He set the cup down. But I'm the one sitting in your ship. Vril stared at him. And I'm the one who knows the exact frequency and encryption pattern your survey vessels have been using for the last decade, he continued, still very pleasantly. And I'm the one who figured out how to build a vacuum suit in a garage. So, he leaned back in the chair and smiled the specific smile of a man who had very carefully thought about a thing for a very long time before doing it. I am going to suggest that whatever deal gets made, my name is on it somewhere, not for ego, just for accuracy. The silence in the room lasted 11 full seconds. Thaka counted them. Vril looked at Orin Sable. She looked at the empty granola bar pocket. She looked at the coffee. She looked back at those calm, patient eyes that had stood in hard vacuum and simply waved. I will, she said at last, in her finest diplomatic voice, pass your suggestion to the council. Great, said Orin. He picked up his coffee. You want some? I brought enough for about 6 cups. I figured, statistically, if there was a ship out here, there was probably a crew. He had, in fact, brought exactly enough for 6 cups. The Ket Door had a crew of 6. The Cassette Don. The universe, it turned out, had not been ready for humans. But then, nobody ever really is.